Welcome to Making It with Terry Wollman, the show that explores the secrets, successes, and strategies for making it in the music biz. And now, here's your host, Terry Wollman.
Welcome to Making It, presented to you by Fireside. I'm Terry Wollman, and I'm your host. My guest today is Hollye Dexter. I appreciate you joining us every week, and I'd like to share my intention that inspires this podcast. Time passes quickly, and I've learned that we should do what's in our hearts and do it well without apologies or excuses. I encourage you to create your life and art in your own unique way and express your artistry with joy and with abandon. Be willing to work uncompromisingly for what you believe in. Success will have a better chance of finding you when you live your life with integrity, focus, and passion. Be selfish with your discipline and selfless in your performance. And don't forget to have fun along the way. If you're joining us live in our virtual audience today, we'll be inviting questions and comments during the second half of the show. So make it count. And simply just request an invitation to speak. And my moderator, Dr. Lisa, will bring you onto the stage. And as I mentioned, we have two other guests that are going to be joining the conversation, Poe Murray and Donna Finkelstein. So thank you for joining us. And we'll bring you on the stage in a few minutes once we get started. Let me tell you about my guest today. That was a lot of business to handle, but I kind of felt like it was important. Here's the story of my guest and why she's here today with me. Having experienced gun violence in her own family, Hollye is a dedicated activist for gun reform, using both her voice and her writing to advocate for change. She has worked for Everytown, Moms Demand Action, and Women Against Gun Violence, lobbying for stronger gun laws both locally and in D.C., meeting with members of Congress, speaking at City Hall, as well as at rallies in schools, churches, and temples. Her work as an activist has been covered on NPR, PBS, the BBC, Al Jazeera, and Rolling Stone. Most recently, she served on the Gun Violence Policy Committee for the Biden campaign and currently serves on the advisory board of Survivors Empowered. Her motivation is to end gun violence and to create a better future for her three children. Hollye Dexter, welcome to Making It.
Thank you so much for having me. Again, you are my dear friend. We have had these conversations at times in private, and I'm glad we're able to share our conversations with a larger audience and hopefully get a larger conversation started.
Yeah, yes, that is my goal and the intention that I think we have both set for today's show. I want to start with basically something that you wrote, Hollye, because you're an author, as well as a mother and an activist and a singer, an artist. So one of the descriptions that I read about you is mom, author, singer, rabble rouser, which I think describes you well. These are your words. Storytelling has existed since the beginning of humankind. Our stories are the connective tissue that holds humanity and possibly even the universe together. Every person on this planet has a unique life path and an interesting tale to share. And yet, so many of us struggle with whether or not we have the right to tell our stories. We are silenced by the fear upsetting others, mainly our family, in writing our truth. Those are beautiful words, Hollye.
Thank you. Those are words I struggled with myself for many, many years.
Yeah, I can imagine. Well, I'd like to use our conversation today as an opportunity to educate and also debunk some misconceptions about gun rights, gun violence, and gun control activism. So I want to start with a question for you. As a gun reform activist, do you want to take everyone's guns away?
No, we don't. That's something that the other side is pushing because they're able to turn us into big, scary monsters that are going to come and, all these angry moms are going to come knocking on your door and taking away your cache of guns, and you'll never be able to defend yourself and, all of that. We have friends and members of our families, all of us do, who are hunters, or who feel more comfortable having a gun at home for self-protection. If someone chooses to have a gun at home for self-protection, what we want to teach is how to be safe with a gun at home, how to make sure you have the proper training, how to keep your guns locked up in a safe so that thieves can't get them, so that children and troubled teenagers can't get them. So we want that kind of safety. However, part of the Second Amendment refers to a well-regulated militia. And that's a part that we're concerned with. So, even Antonin Scalia, Supreme Court Justice, who was very far right, said that the Second Amendment doesn't mean that you can keep any and all types of firearms and use them for whatsoever purpose. So it's important to us that the wrong kinds of guns don't get into people's hands. We don't believe that anybody needs ammunition that can shoot more than 30 rounds at a time or 100 rounds at a time. We know that most of the horrific mass shootings that we've seen, Vegas, Sandy Hook, you can go on, unfortunately, high capacity ammunition clips were used for those. And also AR-15s. So AR-15s are not really a gun, any kind of an assault weapon. It's not the kind of gun you need to keep in the home for self-protection unless you're planning on having like 100 intruders a minute come through your window.
Right.
And they aren't necessary for hunting unless you're hunting people, quite frankly.
Right.
So that's basically where we stand as a movement in America.
As I thought, and thank you for clarifying that. I want to tell people a little bit more about you very quickly and to personalize this, to give the context, if you don't mind.
Sure.
You were not born an activist. You began your career as a background singer, and you recorded national commercials for ESPN and Geico and Coca-Cola. You've performed with artists including Blake Shelton, Moby, Stephen Bishop, Rumor, Howard Jones, Dionne Warwick, Carney Wilson. That list continues to go on. And your original music can be found on iTunes and Pandora and Spotify. You were also a child actress, appearing in the soap opera General Hospital and starring in the family classic, The Adventures of the Wilderness Family.
I did not know we were going to talk about that.
Well, I think it's important. Yeah, we're not going to focus on that the whole time, but again, for context,
it's part of my story.
It is part of your story, and I want to say, and I learned this from you. Attention in the media is most often about people who are killed, but that's not typically focused on survivors of gun violence who can have brain injury, paralysis, PTSD, many other things.
Right.
We often hear about the 40,000 Americans killed by guns every year, but the media rarely covers the more than 100,000 gunshot victims who survive and the family members whose lives are shattered. To make this personal, when you were 14 years old, your 7-year-old brother, Christopher, was shot in the head by a neighborhood teen playing with his father's gun. And you wrote, decades later, we are still trying to save Christopher's life.
Yeah.
First of all, I'm so sorry that for the loss of that part of your brother, Christopher.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So you and our other guest on the show today weren't born activists.
No.
They're and neither are any of the other people who we've seen on television, the young kids from Sandy Hook and all the various, not to limit it, but the people who are vocal, they didn't choose to be injured or witnessed of these tragedies,
right.
and the only choice they could really make was almost a choice that's not makeable. I mean, whether or not they were going to speak, like, again, find the words,
right.
To speak their truth, as you say. So I just want to turn this over to you for a moment before we bring our other guest on and start the story right here.
Yeah. I mean, one of the things we often say, those of us in this movement, is we are all members of a club nobody wants to join, Yeah. And we didn't sign up for this, My brother was 7 years old. There was a teenager down the street. He was a neighbor. I knew him for years. He was a troubled kid. He really was. He was abused by his parents. And, he just snapped one day. He lured my brother inside his house, held a gun up and shot him in the head. I mean, it was horrific. He was about 14 years old when he shot my 7-year-old brother. And it was such, I mean, the drama of that day, seeing my little baby brother missing his 2 front teeth, covered in blood, and paralyzed on one side of his body, his eyes fluttering, and the seizures. I mean, just all of it. I had to hold him in my arms while my single mother, that we had a single mother, drove, through red lights all the way to the ER. He had to have brain surgeries. They were never able to get the bullet out of his brain. So he was never the same person after that day. He's been living his entire life with traumatic brain injury. He's had seizures. He has PTSD. But all the things you hear about from these soldiers that come home from Afghanistan and how they have this traumatic brain injury and they are subject to rages, crying jags. A lot of times there's domestic violence in the home. They self-medicate. My brother has had all of that as a result of PTSD. And yet there are no victim services for him because he is a veteran of a war that he never signed up for. The war going on in the streets of America. So when Sandy Hook happened, and Poe Murray, who's the founder of Newtown Action Alliance, she'll be able to speak to this as well. It shattered me, and it brought back everything I had gone through with my brother. And I had never spoken about it all these years, decades. I didn't really speak about it because I didn't want to bring anyone down with my sad story. And so I just, all I could see, I thought of all those 7-year-olds. I could see my brother at 7 years old, what he looked like, what he went through. And I just said, I won't be able to ever get out of bed again if I don't do something about this. And so I started writing about it, speaking about it, telling people my story. And that was sort of the beginning of it. And it's been almost 10 years now of, it has almost been, if not a full-time, it's sometimes been a full-time occupation for me as I've been employed by several of these organizations. But in between, even in my volunteer hours, it's been almost a full-time occupation. So that's my story.
Thank you for sharing that. There's a couple of things that we're going to be covering today, and I just want to say what they are, and then I want to bring in our other two guests. One of them is, what can people do? Another question I want to pose to you and to our other two guests are, what do you say to yourself and to other people who feel helpless? And I know you do often. And I know I do often as well. We're going to be ironically talking about safety tips for keeping guns in your home. I say ironically because it doesn't surprise me, but I would again, I think there's a preconception or a bias that people who are gun control activists just, it's just a solid no to anything about guns. And that's not really the case. Yeah. You had mentioned home break-ins, and we'll talk a little bit about that, where people who are known to keep guns in their home actually attract more robberies oftentimes.
Well, so I can speak for the state of California. I don't know about all the other states, but I know that here, that's one of the main drivers of home break-ins is people who are looking to steal guns.
Because it's an easy way to get a gun.
It's very difficult to get a gun in California if you're a criminal. So, that's one of the easiest ways for them to get a gun.
And I do want to talk about the power of the NRA a little bit as well. And because, we'll get into that as we go. But Lisa, why don't you bring our other two guests on stage, if you don't mind, Poe Murray and Donna Finkelstein.
Well, hello, Terry, and hello, Hollye, my friend. Nice to see you.
It's a pleasure or an honor to have you on the show. Thanks for joining in on our conversation today. I appreciate it. And also, Donna, if you're there, you can join us as well.
I'm here. Can you hear me?
There you are.
Donna.
Hi, Donna. Hi. Welcome to the show.
Thank you.
Both of you. Donna, I have met Donna before, and her daughter, and I won't be the one sharing these personal stories, but I was a choir conductor in a temple that Donna and her family are a member of. So I remember your story, and because I saw your daughter after she got shot, and was recovering enough to start to come out in public again. Poe, we haven't had the pleasure of meeting, so why don't we start with you, because I know that you have your own personal story as well here. So jump in and tell us just briefly why you are involved in this conversation and what you have to say.
Sure. So in December of 2012, my neighbor shot 20 children and 6 educators in my community. And it was very shocking for us. And many of us in the community felt the need to get involved to create the cultural and legislative changes that is necessary. Since that date, it's been almost 9 years. Gun violence, deaths, and injuries have gone up. And it's been frustrating and heartbreaking that federally there have been no substantive gun violence prevention legislation that has been passed in the last 27 years. Despite that, we know that we have to keep working and building an army of activists to get the job done.
And is this just about money? Is that why that the NRA has so much control, or there are so little, or not, let me say not so little, but my perception is there's not enough control on background checks or people being able to buy 1,000 rounds of ammunition, without somebody wondering, for some automatic weapon, arsenal.
So
that wouldn't spike some sort of an immediate stop and an investigation.
Right.
What's that about?
It is actually about the money.
Okay.
The gun lobby on behalf of the gun industry, they've invested millions and millions of dollars over the last 4 decades to convince Americans that guns will make us safer.
Mm-hmm.
How's that working out, right?
Yeah, it's not working out very well, Hollye, because now we have 400 million guns in our nation, and we have more gun deaths than other nations of our size and financial status. So, we're working really hard. We basically lead an all-volunteer organization to, create the changes that are necessary. And we work with many families who are directly impacted by gun violence, like Hollye and Donna, and so many others who have been impacted, to elevate their voices and get them involved in this fight. But not only that, we have ordinary citizens like myself. I didn't lose a child or a family member, but it's important to me to create a safer America for my children and their children in the future. Because it's just not acceptable to live in a nation when your children feel like they want to move out of the country, to raise their children. So it's fairly a sad situation for all of us in our communities in every state.
And Poe, your organization is Newtown Action Alliance, is that correct?
Yes,
Okay.
It's Newtown Action Alliance.
And can I just
we also
say,
have a foundation as well.
I'm friends with a lot of people in this organization from coast to coast because of the different organizations I've worked with. And I have a lot of favorite people. I have a lot of favorite people in this movement, but Poe is a kick-ass activist, and she is always on the front lines. She is always in the halls of Congress in DC, or at the White House. I mean, she is really powerful in the movement. I just wanted to say that.
Oh, thank you, Hollye. I think we've proven that if we have the heart, we can get a lot done. We don't have a lot of money as a small grassroots organization, but we've proven that we can move some mountains.
That's absolutely true. And I want to say something too about what you said earlier about the NRA having so much money and power. And that is all true, although they've kind of been, can I say shit show on this show?
Yeah, you can say that.
They've
You can say anything you want.
The last couple of years, they've kind of been a shit show. There's been a lot of corruption, and they've, a lot of their walls have come tumbling down. However, You have to think back about the tobacco lobby. The gun problem in America. Guns were America's first major export. And it's one of the ways that we became rich. And it's one of the ways we become rich now because we're selling guns to other countries that are economically developing. And, Mexico wouldn't even have any guns if not for us. And it's so funny to hear people complaining about Mexico. They're bringing in all this, crime. We gave them their guns, all of them. But I also want to say that, the tobacco industry, the tobacco lobby, that was built on the backs of slavery. I mean, that was like an evil thing, evil money that was built off the backs of slavery. And everybody said the tobacco lobby is too huge. You can never beat them. But we did. Eventually we did. We educated the public. People smoke less. We changed laws. We started at the local levels. And that's basically what we've been trying to do in this movement as well. People say, oh, the NRA, you can't topple them. They're too big. Well, they said that about gay marriage. They said that about the tobacco industry. They said it about drunk driving, but we did. So I just want to, keep everybody's spirits up a little bit.
So I want to ask you a question, and Donna, you can be involved in the answer in this also. You're not asking for all guns to be taken away. You're not anti-gun. You are just pro making sure that the truth is nobody does need an assault rifle that can shoot. I've got statistics on other pages. I'll get to them in a moment, and I know you all know them by heart. But in 90 seconds, you can shoot. Is it at 100 rounds with an automatic weapon, and you can do a lot of damage. There's no need. You don't need that for hunting. You don't need that for self-protection.
Correct.
I'm in complete agreement with you. But so what is the goal of what you are trying to do so that people who are concerned about losing their gun rights, and which is a valid concern, if that's something that you believe that you need to have, it's a concern. How do you address that? And Donna, why don't we start with you on that? And welcome to the show.
Well, thank you for inviting me. And I just want to tell your audience that I don't look like that silly face.
The little emoji? You're better looking than that.
I'm a bit inept at the technology. Well, would you like me to start with my story?
Yeah, why not? Yes,
really
of course.
Applies to your question.
Yes.
So in 1999, my daughter Mindy, who was 16 at the time, was working as a camp counselor at the Jewish Community Center in our neighborhood. And a gunman walked in with an assault rifle and shot 70 rounds. And he wounded 5 people, an adult, Mindy, and 3 children. And they all survived. One was dying, but he did survive. And my daughter survived. So from that day forward, I thought, oh, this is not right. So like Hollye was listing and Poe was listing all of the things that we've done all along for legislation, things like that. My focus now, though, is prevention, because no other parent should ever face this nightmare of having a child being shot, and whether surviving or not. So my focus now is prevention. And what I've done, I'm a high school counselor, so I mix my work, my professional life with my personal life. And in the last 20 odd years, have worked toward just, warning parents about safe gun storage in the home.
Yeah, she's been able to overcome a hurdle that the rest of us were working on for a really long time, and nobody could get it done. But she's been able to get information home through LAUSD that nobody else was able to do before.
So, yeah. So, oh my gosh, over 15 years ago, our school district is the second largest school district in the country, aside from New York is number 1. And so I just started calling and emailing and calling and banging on doors and being hung up on. And it was going nowhere fast. And then sadly, things started to move after Parkland. Mm-hmm. And I was able to work with the city attorney and one of our school board members. And after, a couple of years of tweaking and rewriting and this and that, we finally got the school board to pass a it's a
Like a resolution, right?
Thank you. A resolution to send home a notice to every single parent, which is 600,000 families, about safe gun storage. It's a one-page information sheet about if you're going to have a gun in the home, you need to store it, unloaded and locked.
Mm-hmm.
And then since that time, I personally have been involved with probably 5 or 6 other school districts here. It's a timely process. And lastly, one of our assemblywoman from Glendale, which is a local community here, wrote some legislation to have the governor sign to make it law that every school district must notify every parent about safe gun storage in the home. Unfortunately, COVID hit.
Right.
So that has been shelved for 2 years now, but we're still working toward passing that law, but along with to keep approaching other school districts. And through our efforts, other school districts across our nation have done the same successfully.
Yeah.
So what's important here to mention is that you can't measure prevention. There are no statistics because you don't know what you're preventing. What we do know is suicide is the number one death by gun and a gun in the home. And we do know that kids who have been home due to COVID are in the home longer than at school. So we just must tell the parents of what the laws say about your responsibility.
Yeah.
And is that an American statistic or worldwide?
That's American.
Okay.
We are unique in that way.
Yes.
So we hold the title for in the world then, right? For the most gun violence. Is that accurate?
Yeah. Per capita. Absolutely.
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yep. Absolutely. We hold the title.
Yeah, we're winning, but that's not a good thing.
Right? No.
Yeah, that's not something I think is winning.
Yeah.
So let me ask all three of you, because when I asked Hollye, when I asked you to do the show, your immediate answer was not yes, and part of the reason is because you're understandably exhausted. I was while I was reaching out to you, I saw one more story. I believe this was in Nashville, another shopping food market.
Yep.
Murder, assault, and these stories. We've become sadly desensitized to this information. It's just as so many other things, and during the last administration, we got desensitized to a lot of things because people got tired or worked up and excited. Either way, but it was an interesting wearing down of the senses with just information overload.
Yeah.
So, what do you say to yourself, for starters, the three of you? Donna and Poe and Hollye, what do you say to yourself when you feel helpless? And of course, what do you say to other people? Because you are guides and mentors and activists. How do you approach that?
Who wants to start?
I'll start.
Okay.
It's tough. It's very tough. It's very emotional. However, it has to be done, and it has to be done by people like us. And so I don't ever feel like I'm ever going to give up. And whenever I have the opportunity to talk about it, it's easy. And I can comfortably walk up to any legislator and just talk about what needs to be done. And I'm comfortable talking to friends about joining me in a particular event or activity. I mean, it's not easy. And the other thing I've learned since the beginning is to talk to like-minded people. This is not a debate.
Mm-hmm.
These are lives lost. So we want, as parents, we promise our children they will be safe. And that's a responsibility we have.
So you're not trying to necessarily change anybody's mind. You're just trying to keep your family and your community safe.
Right. And if you're going to own a gun in your home, you have a responsibility to everyone to lock it up.
Right.
And you're talking about having a proper gun box or lock box or safe.
Right. And they're easy to have and easy to use if necessary.
Yeah.
Poe?
So I've been in this fight for 9 years, less time than Donna and Hollye. But I feel it's really important for more and more people like me to get involved in this fight. And yes, it's hard. But after every mass shooting incident, when I watch the news, I hear community members saying they didn't think that it could happen to them. But it did. And it has. And it will continue with weak federal legislation and many of the state legislative in legislation as well. So I have 4 children. My 4 children went to Sandy Hook Elementary School. They were graduates of the school when the shooting occurred, but I have to tell you, it impacted them deeply. And that's just 4 children out of so many in my community. And I saw what one AR-15 could do to an entire community, entire nation. It basically, tore our hearts out. And we don't want that to happen again. It has happened in other communities. So it's really important for us to, continue the fight to create the change that's necessary. The fact is, we mentioned this before, guns do not make us safer. We have 400 million guns in our nation. So we have to change the narrative about guns. And safe storage is a really important message. We are working with a family who lost their 15-year-old son due to a unsafe, unsecured gun here in Connecticut. And we're holding a statewide gun buyback day and gun safe giveaway day in October. We really think it's important to change that narrative, right? That a gun-free home is the safest home for our children and families. So we can work on changing the narrative, but we can also work on changing legislation on a local, state, and federal level. And the American people are with us. Over 90% of Americans support universal background checks. 70% of Americans support an assault weapons ban, and many, many other legislative proposals. So I feel like things are changing. A lot of people say there's been no change since Sandy Hook, but there have been. There's been a national conversation about the gun violence issue. And now, we are talking about gun violence that impact the communities, like Black and brown communities that are most impacted by gun violence, trying to make a huge investments in community violence intervention programs. There's $5 billion right now in the Build Back Better Act. So we are making progress. We're talking about it. The federal leaders are trying to do something about it. We have to get involved electorally. We all need to vote on this issue and make sure that we can get to the finish line. But I am hopeful. I have no choice.
Right. May I ask a question before, Hollye, you jump in on your point of view on this too? Poe, you mentioned a statistic about how many Americans are in line with gun safety and restrictions. For any of our audience who decides that they want to question that statistic, can you verify where that's from so that it doesn't, so that it is taken with the seriousness that it needs to be?
Yeah, there are polls. There are polls all the time conducted. Quinnipiac poll out of Connecticut. And the 70% number actually comes from, I believe, a Fox poll.
Okay.
for assault weapons ban. So it's all out
Thank you.
there.
Yeah.
The facts are out there. It's irrefutable. And the other side will try to refute it, but we have all the facts, and we hope that more and more people will research it and decide that guns won't make our homes safer.
But I think what we've discovered is, sadly, facts don't matter to a lot of people in this country.
Right.
On many, many levels. And what they pay attention to is what they feel about something. And so I think the biggest shift that we've had since the Sandy Hook tragedy is a shift in cultural feelings. And that's why you're getting those kind of results out of these polls, where all of a sudden people are like, yeah, we want background checks. Yeah, we want a ban on assault weapons, where that wasn't the case, maybe 5 years ago. We're starting to feel a cultural shift, and people are starting to feel differently about it. And I think that's probably the most hopeful part of this, but it takes time. And to answer my part of the question about what do I do when I get overwhelmed. I mean, for many, many years, I was employed by some of these organizations as a social media director. So it was my job to get up first thing in the morning on East Coast time. I'm on the West Coast, and just start reading every single story on gun violence. And so when the rest of you can say like, it's too much, I got to turn it off, it was literally my job. And so I did have a few crisis points with that. And
understandably.
Yeah. And I had a pretty bad meltdown after the San Bernardino shooting. And I don't know if it was I was just exhausted. It was right before Christmas. It was just, it was local to me. And I had a meltdown. But, we all have another friend in this movement. Her name's Donna Dees Thomases, and she started the Million Mom March 25 years ago or something. She's an amazing activist. And I remember I got knocked down pretty hard at one point in my career as an activist. And she called me, she said, lay down, rest, take your time, lick your wounds, do what you got to do, but come back when you're ready, because the movement needs you. And I always remember those words. And I also, and honestly, like the past 6 months, I have been taking a little bit of time off, because this, on top of COVID, on top of everything else, has been a bit overwhelming. And having a teenager that was having struggles through COVID. But I think about John Lewis, honestly, and I think about the numerous times that he was beaten and jailed and arrested. I mean, I don't know, 25 times, I don't even know. It was like so many times, up until years before he died, he was still getting arrested. And he just kept getting back up and getting back in the ring, no matter what. And Coretta Scott King said, civil rights is never won. Every generation has to fight for it. And I think about that with this issue as well, with gun violence prevention. Every generation is going to have to fight for it. We don't get to a finish line and then it's like, oh, we did it, guys, pop the champagne. I mean, I suspect I'll be a part of this movement, sadly, for the rest of my life. Probably Poe and Donna will be too.
Thank you for sharing that, all three of you. We're going to open it up for our live virtual audience questions, comments in a moment. And I'm not asking you to necessarily agree with my guest. If you have a different point of view, I encourage you to share it respectfully, or we'll end the conversation. But anything you have to say, as long as it's said with respect, you are most welcome, because this is a dialogue. It's a conversation. I spoke to another friend of probably all three of yours. I know she's your friend, Hollye, Sandy Anglin Phillips, yesterday, who was going to join in this conversation, also wasn't able to today. Her daughter, Jessica, died in the Aurora, Colorado midnight movie screening. She was shot and killed. And one of the things that she told me, that Jessie was shot multiple times with an AR-15. And she basically said it takes a lot of lives in a short amount of time. The Colorado shooting only lasted 90 seconds. 90 seconds. He had a 100-round drum. And if the gun hadn't jammed, he would have killed many more people. But here's another interesting fact. He had allegedly, and you might know more about this than I do, obtained 6,000 rounds of ammunition online without being flagged. That's a problem.
Yep.
Yeah,
It is.
Wherever you stand with gun control, that's it. That nobody needs 6,000 rounds of automatic ammunition without a reason that needs to be looked into or
So
considered.
he it's my understanding he purchased all of that online through the internet.
Right.
So no one was following that.
Right.
Right. So that's why that's a problem. And that was what we've always tried to and still try to eliminate is the availability.
So Donna and her family actually brought a suit against the gun manufacturer. Is it the gun industry, the gun manufacturer, Donna? And then it was thrown out because they managed to pass, the NRA managed to get a law passed that nobody can ever sue the gun industry, period. And they're the only manufacturer of anything. In this country that enjoys that immunity.
Right. That's the PLACA law.
The PLACA law. And that's what Sandy and Lonnie also, went to court, and it's a horrible story, but that's what they're working on, trying to get that law
to get that overturned.
Yes.
And with all of the other things that President Biden has to deal with right now with our economy and with COVID and everything, I know that you're hoping that he gives that his attention again, because I know that was part of his platform.
Yeah. Yeah. And
I just want to clear up for everybody
yes, Po.
that the Sandy Hook families have sued the gun industry. And there's a provision in our state laws that allow that lawsuit to go forward. So it's not so clear cut, but PLACA being repealed would certainly help all families who have been victimized by, the gun industry's malpractice to move forward. So it's really important for us to continue to fight to repeal PLACA.
Right, which speaks exactly to what all three of you are saying, which is people need to be vocal. They need to be involved, and they need to vote.
Oh my God, they need to vote.
Yes.
And I say that regardless of where you stand, if you disagree, you still need to vote, so that we can really just get out and speak our voices, and then really. It might be naive to say this, but let the majority truly win.
That would be nice.
Yeah. It would
but
be.
There are still, some structural issues. For example, as you know, like the Dakotas have more senators than California.
Right.
And that makes it very unfair for issues like gun violence prevention. So our organization and many others are pushing for the Senate Democrats to end the filibuster so that we can pass the universal background check bill and other bills, that are absolutely necessary. And also to pass, voter protection laws so that we can get people that are on our side to vote on this issue. Voter suppression will limit our ability to elect gun safety champions to pass these life-saving bills.
So Dr. Lisa Summerour, our moderator today. Lisa, are there any questions or comments coming through, or is there anything you would like to add right now?
Yeah. So
I'm sure.
Thank you, Donna, Po, Hollye. This has been a bit revealing. Coming into this and reading Hollye's information, I was like, okay, this is going to be interesting. And then things started coming up for me. It's amazing the experience you have in your life that you forget or that just aren't present. So in 2005, a very good friend of mine, his sister-in-law, was in a parking lot in Hamilton Township, New Jersey, to get tickets for King Kong for that evening for her family of 4, husband and 2 kids. She was shot and murdered by a white supremacist coming through the parking lot, homeless guy. Just shot her. He messaged the ex-girlfriend just before and said, "I'm going to steal a car." He didn't steal the car. He shot Cindy in the head and killed her. And so as you were talking, this came to me. I was like, myself, I've been robbed at gunpoint twice.
I have once.
Yeah. First, in college, leaving the library with a friend. Okay. It was a soon to be ex, because the gentleman pulled a gun out and he got behind me. So I was like, oh, chivalry's dead. And the second time I was working at a bank, 17 days after my 17th birthday, working at my little bank job from high school. And we were robbed on a Saturday morning. And to have a sawed-off shotgun in your face for a few minutes, thinking this thing doesn't look real, only for them to tell you they found, casings or whatever outside. So I'm struck by something that Hollye wrote when she talks about not just the victims of the crime, which is where often the news goes and that's where our attention goes. But we forget about the people who are left to live with the aftermath of that crime. And so I think of Cindy's family, my really good friend, all her children, her parents had to experience their daughter being murdered and then spend all these years waiting for this thing to go to trial.
Yes.
And so there is pain and hurt and anguish. And if it's someone injured as a result of this, the gun violence, there's even more pain and anguish and hurt and rehab. And some things will never be fully rehabbed. So I just want to say thank you for the courage and the tenacity, because Hollye also spoke to, this never ends.
Right.
I work in diversity and I'm dealing in race and racism. I tell people, I get to go into corporate America and talk about fun stuff. It can be exhausting. It can be exhausting. So thank you for the work that you do for the people who don't feel that they have a voice or don't feel that they have access to a podium where they would be listened to, and continue to support each other and take care of self. Take care of self, because it's the kind of work that could be really invigorating, but it can also just wear you out.
Yeah.
And
it really can.
Unfortunately, we need you doing this work. I did want to ask Hollye to talk a little bit about her art. I think it was the Art and Soul Project. If we could do that.
And then also we have Shelly from the audience,
and she'll
join us in a moment.
Shelly has a question. So maybe we'll hold that, because Shelly may be more on topic where we are now. So Shelly, if you would go to the bottom and hit that little monkey icon, you'll be able to speak and be heard.
Hello.
Hi, Shelly.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Shelly.
Hi, Shelly.
Hi.
Yes.
Hi, Terry. Hi, Hollye. Hi, everybody.
Hi.
I love you all, by the way. Anyway, and I'm such an advocate for what you do and the voices you raise. And I just wanted to make a comment of how the little things matter in being an activist, like what Hollye does and what these wonderful men and women do. I was raised around guns. I grew up in Arizona. My dad was a hunter. My mom was a hunter. And, we had these old-fashioned gun cabinets with the glass that would, portray your guns like they were art, right? And, my brothers and I were raised that we were not to touch these guns. And we didn't. We respected that. But, growing older, and then when my dad passed away, I inherited, his gun collection. And, my boys used to go out with him and such. And when we moved to California almost 10 years ago, I had one of those beautiful gun cabinets with the glass display in it. And if I hadn't have met Hollye and gone to some of the events and read the educational things and watched the videos and heard these people speak and such about the importance of proper storage and safety. And I remember reaching out to her. I don't know if you remember this, Hollye, but I was like, I got rid of that glass front gun cabinet. And it's not that there was any threat in my personal home, but somebody could have broken in, and you just never know. Last year, my son, who's Hollye's son's age, had some very real struggles and difficulties to where there could have been a real danger there of having those items accessible. All you'd have to do is break the glass, and you think the little old-fashioned key lock works, but the whole point of this is, and so they got put in one of those big old heavy-duty safes that nothing's going to crack open and away out of sight. So, and he has that combination, but me. So I wanted to say thank you and point out there's the big things to address, but those little things make a difference too. And they mean the world, and they change people's opinions, and they change their viewpoints, and they change lives. And I believe that they save lives.
And Shelley, hi, it's Donna.
I just wanted to put that out there and say thank you.
Shelley, hi, it's Donna. And
Hi, Donna.
and what I find that when you the sound is reverberating. Sorry.
I hear that.
The sound is reverberating. Sorry.
Why don't you mute yourself and then unmute yourself again?
Are you there?
There you go. That's it.
Me? Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
No.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah,
Okay.
that's great.
Is that if I tell one parent, then they in turn will tell other parents. So it really just spreads across. So if you're talking to a group of 5, then then they repeat it, and the word gets out there, and it's you just don't know the behavior of a child. Children act first, they feel, and then they think, and that's the danger.
Yeah. And Donna and I spent a lot of years together going out and speaking at schools and mommy and me classes and things like that, explaining that to parents and teaching them about the importance of keeping guns safe in the home. And Donna's also one of my very, very favorite activists. She just gets right out there to the heart of things in her community. And I learned it from her. And she brought me into a lot of this. And I know that we changed minds and changed lives, even in gun owning homes. When we were speaking in schools, people like Shelley who were like, I never thought of it like that. I never thought that someone might break into my home and steal my guns and use that gun to commit crimes. It's just, once you start the conversation going, again, it's getting back to changing the culture, changing the conversation, opening up the conversation. People never used to want to talk about guns. They would not, like, I've taught a lot of parents how to have the conversation about when you're having a play date. How do you awkwardly bring up, or even with your own family members, if your kids are going over to grandma and grandpa's house or Uncle Bob's house, like, how do you talk about whether or not there's a gun in the house somewhere? And they think, oh, well, it's under the pillow. He won't find it. Children will find everything.
Right. Think back when we were kids.
Totally. They will find their Christmas presents. They will climb. They will, they will find it.
Right.
So it's having these conversations and not being, if you're not awkward about it, it's not awkward.
Hollye, I want to ask you one other thing. We had mentioned it earlier, and then I have a closing question or closing questions that I ask all my guests, but I'm going to modify the question and ask all 3 of you today. But before we do that, we used to use the term, you told me this, that you used to use the term gun violence prevention activist. It's now been modified to gun control activist.
By some.
What term do you think best defines or is the most, I even hesitate to use the word comfortable, because there's nothing comfortable about this conversation, and there shouldn't be.
Well, I will just say personally, now this is not the national feeling, I don't think, but for a long time, we let certain organizations that were well-funded tell everybody what the messaging should be and how we should present ourselves. And we didn't want to upset anybody. So we said, well, we're gun violence prevention activists. And then it finally got to a point like a year or so ago where a lot of us in Women Against Gun Violence, which is it's a 25-year-old organization here in Los Angeles, just were like, no, we're not. We want to control guns. They're out of control, and we want to control them. And we're tired of being polite. And I don't. That's a few people's opinions. I'd be interested to hear what Poe's and Donna's. Donna works with Brady. Also, Poe works with Newtown Action Alliance. So they might have very different thoughts about that.
Well, I still use gun violence prevention because that's something I've been talking about. But the messaging is the same. And as soon as you get right into it, to me, it's not, the message is there. It's not about, I don't see a lot of difference for me personally when I present.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Poe.
Yeah, so when we first joined the movement, they even had market research done and had marketing folks come on these coalition meetings. And they advised us to not use the word control, not use the word end gun violence, don't even say the word ban. And meanwhile, the other side, the gun lobby and the gun industry and their supporters, are basically pushing for any type of guns for anyone, everywhere, unapologetically. Meanwhile, we're suffering on our side because Americans are dying, so many of them, particularly the children, which is now, firearms is now the leading cause of death for children and teens in America. It's tragic. We need to scream and shout. So we decided, many years ago that we will use the words gun control, but it really depends on when and why. We meet with Congress all the time. And when we meet with Republican congressional members, we might use the word gun safety because it helps to start the conversation in a non-hostile way. Whereas gun violence prevention to me is more about community, violence intervention programs. That's true gun violence prevention. And gun control is controlling guns like assault weapons ban, etc. So it just depends on the circumstances. We're comfortable with using all of those words.
Mm-hmm. I want to ask all three of you one of the three closing questions that I ask everybody. Since this show is called Making It, I typically ask people what that means to them both personally and professionally, as far as having a good life and creative process and bringing integrity and passion to everything that you do. But I want to ask, and you can answer in any way that you want. And I'll start with you, Hollye. But I think more as an activist, or in what we are focusing on in today's conversation, what does making it mean to you?
I mean, I guess for me, it would be living a life of integrity, knowing that I was a useful member of society. No matter what I'm doing, I hope that the words that I write touch people in a positive way. I hope that when I sing, I bring joy to people. I hope that when I'm doing activism, it will improve other people's lives for generations to come. And if I am living a life in integrity, then, and staying true to my intention, I don't know what could be making it better than that.
Well said. Poe, what about you?
Yeah, so making it for me would be passing, many, many federal legislation to save many, many lives. But on the incremental side of it, making it to me is saving one life. And I know that, myself and Hollye and Donna have done that already with conversations that we are having with, friends and family to save a life and just changing the culture. So I think we are making it already, Hollye and Donna. I think you've done so much already in the years you've been active. And hopefully we can make it to the finish line. After the Sandy Hook tragedy, everyone told us it's not a sprint, it's a marathon. But you know what I'd like to see is the finish line.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
I would too. Donna?
And for me, it's truly inspiring my two daughters to become activists on their own right.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
And I would imagine that that's something that is going to be, it would be hard for them not to.
Yes, because it was personal, but they didn't have to go with it, especially Mindy, who was wounded and still suffers from PTSD. However, I'm most proud of what they've done as well.
Well, Mindy and Hollye, your brother, and all of the people who have been affected and the families have so much to be proud of. There's absolutely no question. I I have one more question for you, Hollye, and then I will give last words to any of the three of you for anything else that you'd like to close the show with. At this point of your life, with everything that you know to be true, what would you tell your younger self?
Oh boy. I would tell myself to hang in there because I things were rough for my younger self, really rough. And I would tell myself it's not always going to be this hard, and you're going to get to a place where you're okay and you have solid ground to stand on. And to keep, don't let anybody tell you what you can't do. Oh, you can't do that, or you don't have the degree to do this, or you don't have the education to do that, or when I became an activist, I didn't know anything about government. I didn't know anything about how to get laws passed, and I just got in there and started doing it. And so I would tell myself to not be limited by my own limiting self-beliefs.
Beautifully answered. So I want to thank the three of you, Donna Finkelstein, Poe Murray, Dr. Lisa Summerour, my moderator every week, and of course you, Hollye Dexter, my dear friend, and powerful, kick-ass women, all three of you. So closing words for any of you, you're welcome to say anything right now.
Well, my closing words would be for the audience. If you, I always give a homework assignment to when I speak to parent groups. Please share the information about safe gun storage to anyone and everyone that you know, and talk comfortably about this issue.
Yeah. And
Thank you, Donna.
I would say just if you feel like, overwhelmed and you don't know what to do, there are some amazing organizations out there. I happen to serve on the advisory board for Survivors Empowered, which is Sandy and Lonnie Phillips' organization. It's victims of gun violence, survivors of gun violence, and their friends and their family and their communities that have been impacted. And they're looking for ways to provide services to victims. And they're also in there, like with Poe, and they're in the halls of Congress, and they're, talking to the White House all the time. They're doing great work. So check out survivorsempowered.org. And just like I said before, don't lose hope, because it's up to all of us to keep doing this work so that the next generation inherits a better future. And Poe?
Yeah, so my last words, I like to give people homework too. I would encourage anyone listening to this to go to www.newtownaction.org. We have many, many campaigns that we are working on. In particular, every Monday from 12 to 2 p.m. Eastern Time, we call Congress and we invite anyone. Anyone can do it. We have Sarah Kniznik, who is our community outreach director, and she will help anyone to call Congress and urge them to pass legislation or support the $5 billion for community violence intervention programs. So, we have a campaign for you. So join us. Anyone can do it. We started out as non-activist. I was a physical therapist myself, but we can learn it and we can do it.
And I have a little plug if you live in the Los Angeles area, Women Against Gun Violence, and I'm also a member of Brady United, which is a national organization. So easy to get involved. Just go on the websites.
So the point is, if you've got any questions or want to do anything or feel like you'd like to know what to do, you want to get educated, reach out to any of these people that are on the show today. Reach out. They're all findable. They've all got websites. They've just given them to you. Dr. Lisa has put some of them up on the crawl. You can see them. So just go back and look and listen again to this show, and you can see. But there is something to do, and there's nothing that is too small that wouldn't be of great value.
That's right. Tiny, tiny actions can make a big difference. Little, tiny, just voting, just registering, little actions make a big difference.
And that includes if you want to learn more. If you're on the fence, about this and you want to ask questions or have a respectful conversation, reach out. It's not an argument. It's a dialogue. Mm-hmm. And our guest Shelley was a great example as well. I mean, her family, they still hunt. But there's somebody who already had a deep respect for weapons, but really changed their point of view. Actually, Hollye, from knowing you, and getting involved in fundraisers and things like that as well. So I thank all three of you. Dr. Lisa, was there anything more you wanted to add?
No, you brought Shelley back in, and I was just thinking about her comment. I wanted to thank her for sharing that, because that's that one person in her home for people to not see that visual representation of us idolizing a weapon that can change somebody's whole perspective on it. I grew up in a family full of hunters too, Shelley. My grandfather and his brothers were all fishermen and hunters. So I get it, but I never saw weapons hanging up on walls. They were always in their cases in the closet somewhere where we weren't supposed to get to them. So thank you for sharing that, because I think that's as important as the bigger picture of the more public activism. We can all be individual activists in our own way.
Note, literally, I would like to just thank everybody for being in this conversation with us today. Poe Murray and Donald Finkelstein, thank you so much for sharing your very personal stories and for all of the work that you do. And of course, Hollye, Dexter, I love you. I respect you. I admire you. And I thank you also for allowing me to shine a light on your story and the very important, extremely important work that you are all doing to make our community, and our country and the world a better place. So thank you.
Thank you, Terry. I love you back.
Thank you, Terry.
Thank you, Terry.
You're so
welcome.
welcome.
Thank you, Hollye and Donna.
Thank you, Poe, Hollye.
Thank you, Poe and Donna. Thank you so much for joining today.
It was a pleasure.
Great. And to our audience, our virtual audience, and our listening audience, to the people who are listening to the archive, we thank you for spending your time with us. We appreciate you. Stay safe, stay inspired. We'll see you all next week. Take care, everybody.
Tune in again next week for another great episode of Making It with Terry Wollman.